So I think, as we all know at this point, there have been some pretty wild rumors spreading about players, personnel, coaches in LSU's program. I'll break that down. What we know, what we don't, what we should be worried about, and where we go from here as far as those rumors are concerned. All of that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, we are on YouTube as well. So make sure to check out Locked On LSU on YouTube. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every day. I graduated from LSU. I've been covering LSU sports since 2016, and I'm now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, I want to get into some of the rumors swirling around Twitter and around, college football spaces. I want to get into what we saw from the defense in the Citrus Bowl. I mean, a huge, huge win for LSU in so many ways, not just the scoreboard, but, beyond that, what that really means for the program. But before we get into all of that, just so you all know, I usually record the podcast the night before. So Tuesday's podcast was recorded Monday evening before the Monday Night Football game. So I didn't get a chance to share with you all my thoughts on what transpired on Monday Night Football. Of course, Bills at Bengals, one of the biggest games in the NFL. I understand this is an LSU podcast, but I think that this is something that transpires not just one team or one league, but really just as sports fans as a whole. Demar Hamlin, a safety for the Buffalo Bills, went down on the ground in the middle of the Monday Night Football game. And we saw an ambulance come out immediately. We learned that he was getting CPR in the middle of the field. And this was something that was completely unprecedented before. I had never seen this. And as scary as it is to see players go down with injuries or concussions, torn ACLs, whatever it might be, it's terrifying to watch. But you always have the comfort of, them giving a wave to the fans or a thumbs up, or you see his teammates give him a pat on the back and say, we'll be back there soon. But we didn't have the comfort of seeing that when Demar Hamlin went down. I saw the reaction from Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, Sean McDermott, the Buffalo Bills head coach, all the Bills players, and they were in complete shock, tears rolling down their faces, and just looked so terrified. And that's when I knew that this was different, that this was not just a run-of-the-mill concussion. This was not any other injury, that this was most likely life-threatening. So I just wanted to extend my sincerest thoughts and prayers to Demar Hamlin and to his family, to the Buffalo Bills organization, to everyone there that experienced and witnessed that. I can only imagine how terrifying of a scene that must have been. And I can only imagine how scared Demar Hamlin's family must be. The most recent update as of Tuesday afternoon when I'm recording this podcast is that Demar Hamlin spent the night in the ICU and it remains in critical condition. That update provided by the Buffalo Bills, about midday on Tuesday. So really hoping for the best. I think the most wonderful thing is that Demar Hamlin has a GoFundMe to raise money for toy drives and for youth football camps and to support his mother's daycare. And he had a very, very humble initial goal for that GoFundMe to raise $2,500 for toy drives and to help support his mother's daycare. That GoFundMe is now up to, at this point on Tuesday afternoon, is now up to $4 million. I think that's such a wonderful testament to sports and how, that there is a human side to sports. Even though they were fans in those stands wearing two different jerseys of two different teams, we can all come together and understand that life is just bigger than sports. So I will absolutely be keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that Demar Hamlin pulls through. He's able to see his GoFundMe and his toy drive and all of the organizations and charities that he supports get so much financial support. I hope that he pulls through to see all of the emotional support that has been poured out from his teammates, the rest of the players around the league, coaches, general managers, fans across the league, just people in general, extending their sincerest thoughts and prayers to him and his family. So again, just really scary scene for Demar Hamlin. Really wonderful testament from a former LSU Tiger, Ryan Clark, on SVP last night, on Monday night rather, about what this game is, how scary it truly is, his perspective as being a player who was also in a really, really terrifying, life-threatening injury, suffered that life-threatening injury while he was a player. So, if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, it's a really wonderful back and forth between he and SCP. Really wonderful insight for anybody, but especially considering there's a little bit of an LSU tie there, and Ryan Clark being a former LSU Tiger. So just I wouldn't have felt good about not at least addressing this on the podcast. It feels a little crass and it feels a little inauthentic to continue with conversations about this sport while there's a man fighting for his life. But we're going to do our best. We're going to move forward. And I know that I will, and I know you will too, be continuing to keep Demar and your thoughts and your prayers in your hearts. And we will hopefully hear some very good news soon. But coming in next, I'll get into what I initially wanted to talk about, some rumors swirling around about LSU football. What does it mean? What can we believe? What's not true? And how can we prove that? We'll get into all of that coming up next. But first, I want to tell you that betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every basketball and amateur league out there. There's pro football, college bowl season. We had a great day of bowls yesterday. Shout out to the Green Wave. Shout out to Tulane getting a huge win over USC in their bowl game. They got basketball, both pro and college level. They've got it all on betonline.net. So if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports today. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
I think he's been going back and forth, pretty much all year. It was, we felt like, he just needed to get some clarity in terms of, remember now, all this stuff happens with trying to get draft grades. We're prepared for the bowl. We're on the road recruiting. There's a lot of balls in the air at once, and you want to give your guys the best counsel as well as to, where they may go in the NFL draft. So we're trying to compile all that information for him while he's trying to make the best decision. And I just think, for him, he needed to get all that information, and once he did, he made the best decision for him, and we support him 100%. We're excited for him, and he's ready. He'll have a great career.
There you go. That was Brian Kelly in the pre-Citrus Bowl press conference talking about Keshawn Booty's decision to declare for the NFL draft. And this is something that I touched on in the podcast last week. Whenever Keshawn, earlier in the day, it was announced that Kayshon was going to be unavailable for the bowl game. And then just a few hours later, we get a tweet from Kayshon Boutte saying that he was going to declare for the NFL draft. And it wasn't a very nicely done up, graphic that was put together by the LSU football social team that we saw from every other player that was declaring for the NFL draft. It was just simply a tweet that said, I'm declaring for the NFL draft. So I thought, what is going on here? How can you go from, you're coming back to LSU to now you're unavailable for the bowl game to now you're declaring for the NFL draft? And look, every player has every single right to change their mind. That's so fair. I understand that. Maybe Kayshon Boutte just had a change of heart. Maybe he looked at it and got some more counseling and talked to his family, talked to his coaches, talked to his mentors, whoever it might be, and said, look, I initially thought that coming back to LSU was going to be the best opportunity for me. But now after further thought, I'm thinking it's best to go to the NFL, whether it's because you just want to fulfill your lifelong dream, whether it's you're ready to start making some money, and whatever your reasoning might be. Sometimes you just change your mind, and I get that. But there have been some rumors perpetuated on social media about what went down at the SEC championship game, how that maybe contributed to Kayshon Boutte's draft decision, and how this involves other members of LSU football, both on the coaching level, on the recruiting level, front office level. And look, I am not going to perpetuate rumors that was put out there by a Texas A&M fan account. Okay, I've seen the rumors. I know exactly what everyone is talking about. I've seen it. And I've heard things from reputable sources. I've heard things that kind of confirm one another. I've heard things that are different than one another. The specifics are kind of different from story to story. So, look, I'm not going to perpetuate rumors. I'm not going to say anything that I don't know for certain to be true. But I think what we can use is the information that we do have and the insight that we did get from Brian Kelly. So let's just use our logic. Let's look at what we do know. There are one person alleged in the rumors is Keshawn Booty. So he is one person who was alleged and who is no longer part of this program. Now, a lot of that kind of ties into, or at least people think that ties into his decision to declare for the NFL draft. Brian Kelly was asked why Kayshon Boutte was unavailable for the bowl game before he initially announced that he was going to be declaring for the NFL draft. Here's Brian Kelly.
Unavailable, as you know, means I can't speak to some of the reasons behind it, or I would have been more specific. So when we issue a statement using the word unavailable, we can't get into some of the specifics.
Okay, so he's not going to give us any information. I didn't expect Brian Kelly to give us any information. I don't expect LSU football to ever come forward and say exactly why it is that Kayshon Boutte was unavailable for the bowl game, but I think that we can all use our own logic based off of the information that we have at hand. So, one person alleged that was Kayshon Boutte. He's no longer part of the program. He was unavailable for the bowl game, and we're not going to get confirmation from the coach or anybody else of exactly what that means. Now, the other person that was alleged that is no longer part of the program, that person got a promotion. That person is off doing something else at another school in a larger role. Now, I'm going to use my judgment and my knowledge of football on any level and say if there was any sort of controversy or scandal surrounding coach, player, front office person, whoever it might be, then that person probably isn't going to get promoted. That person is probably not going to get any job of at any other comparable program. Let's just use our mind there. Now, there are other people who are alleged in this rumor. And, there's a reporter that did their due diligence and asked about the assistants. This was Brian Kelly post-game.
Are all of your coaches in good standing heading into the offseason with you and the university?
Absolutely. 100%. Yes. Look, I hold our players to high standards, and they know that. And we have a high standard. We have a high standard. I've been in it for 3 decades. We have high standards for everybody that's in our program. And that includes coaches and support staff and anybody that's affiliated with this program. And so they're held to that highest of standard as well. And so there are no coaches or support staff that are currently with me that have done anything that would require me to feel as they haven't met the highest of standards that are required within our program.
I think that we all know exactly what Brian Kelly is saying there without explicitly saying it. He's basically denying, not basically, he is denying all of the rumors surrounding any members of the coaching staff that were alleged to have done inappropriate things or have engaged in inappropriate conduct, as alleged in the rumor that's been circulating around social media and so on and so forth. So there you go. There you have it. I mean, Brian Kelly says all the coaches are held to a very high standard. That is something that I wholeheartedly believe, that this coaching staff and these players, every member of the front office, all of the recruiting staff, everybody underneath the thumb of LSU football, I believe is held to a very high standard. And I believe if there was any fireable offense then that person will be held to that standard. So enough with the rumors. I'm sick and tired of hearing the rumors. Look, I'm not naive to think that something like this between a player and another, consensual partner. I'm not naive to think that that has never happened before. I believe that whatever happened, LSU football internally took care of it how they felt and, brought discipline, however, to whatever level that they felt. However, that person was disciplined in a certain way, how they reacted and how they decided to move forward is completely their right. All I'm saying is the people who are accused of doing something, I think that Brian Kelly and the way that the rest of the college football world has reacted or even rewarded those people, I think that goes to show that the rumor is simply just a rumor as far as those people are concerned. So I know this is kind of a cryptic conversation to have because I want to be so incredibly sensitive to the situation. I don't want to be somebody who's perpetuating rumors, and I don't want to be talking about somebody who probably has been deeply affected by this within their personal life, within their families. That's totally not my place. But this is something that is referencing LSU and referencing this LSU football program, and that is 100% what I am here for. So let's chill with the rumors. Let's move forward. Let's keep in mind what the important thing is, and that is this LSU football program putting an absolute whooping on Purdue in the Citrus Bowl, getting to 10 wins, and the fact that this is going to be the game and this is going to be the LSU team that we talk about throughout the offseason and that the college football world looks at throughout the offseason and says, this team is legit. Now, coming up next, I know there's a sexy thing that everybody wants to talk about, but there's also an underrated aspect to this game that I haven't talked about on the podcast and maybe isn't getting talked about enough. So I want to get into that coming up next. Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We will not get to a Mailbag Wednesday on today's podcast, but we will get to that on Thursday's podcast. So it'll be a Mailbag Wednesday on a Thursday. So make sure to send in all of your LSU questions, whether that is recruiting, whether that's transfer portal, whether that's the Citrus Bowl, whether that's LSU basketball, whatever it might be. LSU questions, make sure to get those in. You can send them in on Twitter at Caroline Fenton 1 or at Locked on LSU, or feel free to post some questions below. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, of course, you can find us on YouTube, Locked on LSU. So I know that the sexy thing to talk about and the biggest story right now is what we saw offensively against Purdue in the Citrus Bowl. I know that the biggest story is the two quarterbacks, what we saw from Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier, two quarterbacks who played great against Purdue. I know that the 63 points that LSU put up against Purdue, that's the sexy thing. Malik Neighbors is a big story, rightfully so, the MVP of the Citrus Bowl. He had over 160 yards receiving, and he had a touchdown pass. Everybody should be talking about the quarterback, should be talking about Malik Neighbors, who I guess we can throw under that umbrella of a quarterback who played against Purdue. I'm kidding. But what I want to talk about, because we haven't talked about it enough, and I feel like it's a secondary story, and it doesn't deserve to be secondary because it's not the sexy thing that we saw, but it was also so important for a few different reasons. And I want to talk about the defense. I want to talk about the defense that we saw in the Citrus Bowl against Purdue. This conversation being couched with the fact that I understand that Purdue was not playing with their A team offensively. I want to couch this by saying I know that Aiden O'Connell, Purdue's starting quarterback, who had a really solid season for Purdue this year, wasn't playing. I know that their quarterback rather, that started for Purdue, it was his third career start in 6 years. I know that. I get that. I understand that. I understand that Purdue's two leading receivers, wide receiver and a tight end, were not out there on the field. I get that. I understand. But I still want to brag on the LSU defense. One thing that I really took note of, and this was one thing that I really talked about leading up to this game, was the young guys and the opportunity that they were going to get, especially on the defensive line, with Ali Gaye, Jaquelin Roy, and BJ Ojulari declaring for the NFL draft and opting out of the Citrus Bowl. I looked at this as a really wonderful opportunity for some of either the younger guys or guys who hadn't gotten a lot of opportunity. Mike Jones, who just declared for the NFL draft. So congratulations to Mike Jones. Not a young guy, but also a guy who didn't get a ton of opportunity or a ton of starts or snaps in an LSU uniform, but also the young guys, some of the true freshmen, some of the redshirt sophomores, the redshirt freshmen, the opportunities that they were going to get. And I want to highlight these guys, the young guys that really took advantage of these opportunities. First and foremost, a name that I've really talked about a lot since the end of the season, going into the bowl game, and somebody who will be able to compete for a starting role to fill some of the holes that have been left by this defensive line that's now, feels kind of empty with 3 starting pieces going to the NFL draft, and that's Savion Jones. He played the edge rusher position against Purdue. He recorded a sack. I think Savion Jones is going to be a name that we start to learn and know and love going into this 2023 season. Also, Xavier Carter, same situation, sophomore, played at the edge rusher position. He also recorded a sack, so big for Xavier Carter as well. And Quad Wilson, who has 0 starts throughout his LSU career. He only saw the field twice in 2 games so far this season. But he had a huge play against Purdue, had a nice pick 6 and returned it 99 yards for a touchdown. So Quad Wilson, and it wasn't a guy that I really knew a ton about because it wasn't a guy that we saw a ton of, but also a guy who really made his presence known on Monday night against Purdue. So some of the young guys taking advantage of these opportunities that they got, which is what I think is so key in a bowl game, is allowing these young guys to get experience and to get reps in an environment that doesn't have stakes following this. It doesn't have, big game stakes of, you beat Alabama or you beat Ole Miss or you beat whoever. And then your hopes for the SEC championship are alive. It really, while the bowl games are important in and of itself, there's no stakes really. And then we also saw some proven commodities continue to show up on the defensive side of the ball. Harold Perkins and Mekhi Wingo each recorded a sack. Those are 2 names that we know and we have grown to love as they've really had their breakout seasons in their first year at LSU. Mekhi Wingo, his first year after transferring from Missouri, Harold Perkins, a true freshman. They are known commodities who continue to make plays. And even though it didn't show up on the stat sheet, I thought Harold Perkins had a wonderful game yesterday. I thought that he continued to show his speed and his ability to get to the quarterback. And there was one play in particular where Harold Perkins is on the far right side. I guess it was if you're the quarterback, the left side of the field, and then the quarterback runs to the right side of the field, and Harold Perkins was able to catch up to him, and get him out of bounds. So I thought that was big, even though it was something that didn't show up on the stat sheet in terms of sacks, still making his presence known. Greg Brooks and Jark Bernard-Converse, 2 players that we know and love, 2 players that have gotten a good bit of field time this season. Each had an interception, again, continuing to make their presence known and to continue to make big plays in the bowl game. And I think overall, highlighting individual performances, but overall, looking at this LSU defense, anytime you can hold a team to 7 points. And I know, I mentioned it. I know that this was a team that was without its starting quarterback, without some of its most key and important pieces offensively, even though that this was a team that was without its head coach, had their offensive coordinator as the interim coach. Anytime you can hold any team to 7 points, that's really impressive. And that last touchdown came very late in the game in the 4th quarter. So LSU at a point was leading 49-0 through 4 quarters, through 3 quarters, 3 and change. That's really impressive. That's a really good day defensively, especially considering 3 of your most important players on the field and leaders off the field, considering they weren't out there and you're playing with a lot of really young guys and experienced guys. I think that says a lot. And I think that at least I feel, and I think you should feel too, very confident about this LSU defense moving forward, even without some of the known commodities that have really helped bridge this gap from the Ed Orgeron to the Brian Kelly era. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen today. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.